sort a sort of a TV glimpse into the cognitive thinking which goes on in the mind of Ravi Venkatesan, and how do our listeners replicate this?
Well, you shouldn't replicate it. You should follow your own path. That's sort of the nutshell of it. So I think I've been very lucky to do many, many interesting things, as you point out, in my life. And but the most important thing is not on the CV. And the most important thing is that when I started out, I was very much below average in every way within. So right till about sixth or seventh standard, I was terrible at sports, had no social skills, hung out with two other losers, was, middle of the class or below in studies, just below average in all dimensions. And my mother was really worried. And then something significant happened. I had to, because of a health issue, I had to miss seventh standard. I had to drop out and stay at home. And those days I lived in Chandigarh, and we lived next to a very nice government library, a public library. And I started going there every day to read. And I fell in love with science and, read voraciously. And when I rejoined the class a year later, I was way ahead of everybody else. Okay. I was at the level of the teachers. And so suddenly my academic performance shot up, with it my self-confidence. And that really got me on a roll. One of the things I've learned looking back at my whole life is how much more important just hard work is compared to talent. Okay. So, fairly early, I had to compete in IIIT and places like that with some people who were just incredibly bright, just incredibly bright. I was okay. But I was ambitious. So I said, okay, in order to succeed, I have to work 3 times as hard as anyone else. And I did. And so, in fact, in my book, which is out here called What the Heck Do I Do with My Life, I start with a quote from a lady called Carol Dweck, who's a very famous psychologist. She says, a true person's potential is both unknown and unknowable. It is impossible to foresee what can be accomplished with years and years of passion and toil. And I would add good luck. So the real story out here is, look, I think we all underestimate what we can achieve ourselves, and we underestimate what other people can achieve. And it's just amazing what a good mindset and hard work can accomplish. The second thing that the nice resume you read out doesn't say is all the failures. You see, a resume is actually a story that you put out for the world to see and clap and appreciate. But what it misses out is the many things that you tried that didn't work out, the many times you had failures and disappointments, and you had to get up and try again in order to achieve it. So I would say, don't be misled by the short summary CV, because it also misses out many, many, many things that were less than impressive. But overall, if you say, how have I been able to do all this? I would say one is hard work. A second one is I remain curious, Viren. Okay. Even till today, I'm curious and interested about everything. And so then if you say, what is the thread that connects all these crazy things you've done? It is just my curiosity led me there. So Bank of Baroda, one day, the Raghuram Rajan, who's the governor, RBI, called me in 2015 and said, would you chair Bank of Baroda? I said, you must be crazy. It's not April 1st. Otherwise, I think you're pulling my leg. And I said, I'm neither a banker nor a public sector guy. And then he said, look, it's an adventure. And do you think you'll do worse than the people who came before you? And at that time, looking at the NPAs, it seemed hard to do worse. And so I said, oh, this sounds like a good adventure. And I ignored all the good advice I got saying, this is too risky. And I did it. And so I've remained curious, and I've remained willing to take on new challenges, not afraid to fail. And I think that has made a big difference.
I think, you very nicely undermined your talent. But I think the leaf out of the discussion which you mentioned is that some of us were not fortunate to be as talented as you are, can always fall back on hard work and try to make up
No, no,
as
no.
much as
This
possible.
was no false modesty, Viren. Look, everybody has some skill. Okay. Okay. I have my skills. One of the early things I realized is I'm not going to be a great engineer ever. I was a competent fellow by hard work, was getting good grades, but I wasn't going to, change the world or anything. But I realized what I was good at was actually inspiring people, leading people, getting them to work behind a common mission or goal. And so I've built my career around that. So the trick is to figure out what you're really good at and stop pretending you're good at something else. So, yeah.
Okay, so since the topic of our today's discussion is how to flourish in turbulent times, and you've also now recently written your second book, which is what the heck do I do with my life. I just remembered one John Rockefeller's quote, which you are very nicely associated with, that I always try to turn every disaster into an opportunity. And I think whether you look at what happened in the last 2 years with all of us due to COVID, or for that matter, what we are going through currently in terms of the entire Russia-Ukraine crisis, which is suddenly has taken the world by surprise. So the time and again, we find ourselves in this whole midst of turbulence.
Yeah.
And you, having led large companies and businesses successfully, have dealt with this whole volatility and the turbulent yourselves over a long period of time. The whole VUCA world, right?
Yeah.
In terms, and it continues to be ambiguous, volatile. So, what would be your advice be to people in terms of navigating such uncertain times in the real world, right? And coming out triumphantly.
I think
That's
that's a,
one. Before you
yeah.
jump there, I also noticed there is a dinosaur on the front page of the book. I also want to know, what does that symbolize?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, Look, I think the most important thing for all of us to realize is that we've enjoyed this period of about 70 years of relative stability, and that period is over now. And we are now in a period of extreme change, extreme turbulence, which will last certainly all of this century, maybe longer. And in the book, I say the world will change more in this century than in all of human history. And that's not an exaggeration, Viren. There are many, many forces which are driving this. Technology, for instance, is driving that. Climate change and the ways in which the planet is reacting to our bad behavior is driving some of it. New ideas and polarization is creating conflict. Ukraine is one example. In our own country, we are polarized on so many different issues. And this is true globally. There's demographics, the fact that we're living longer, and that has huge implications, is also a factor. Like this, many things are coming together to create a period of incredible change. Now, the thing to know about periods of such changes, it throws up great opportunities for if you know how to deal with it. And it creates huge challenges if you're not able to adapt to it. And the reason the dinosaur is on the cover is, this is it's the dinosaur is one of the animals that became extinct 65 million years ago when some asteroid hit the Earth. There was enormous and sudden change, and 90% of all living things could not adapt, and they became extinct, like the dinosaur. And few things, including our ancestors, the early mammals, were able to adapt to the new conditions, and we became the most successful species. So that's what is going to happen now, that those who know how to adapt to change, those who are able to see and embrace opportunity will do amazingly well. Like you're seeing some people, the unicorns. Every week, India produces yet another billion-dollar valued company. At the same time, those who are unable to adapt to change, who don't have the right skills, wrong mindset, will get crushed. Okay. And the whole book is written to say, look, wake up, stop sleepwalking your way through your life, become more intentional about your choices. Most of all, it is important to develop the right mindset, which is the set of beliefs you have about the world and about yourself, etc. It's important to develop the right skills, and I focus on 4 skills. And then I focus a lot on developing what are called intangible assets. And we can talk more about what are intangible assets, because today we're here talking about wealth management, which is one kind of asset, the financial assets. But important as financial assets are, the intangible assets are way more important. So you're asking me, in a sense, the leading question that causes me to summarize the book. Okay. But I think we're in a period like we have never seen before. And all of us, whether individuals or organizations like Bank of Baroda or anyone else, countries, are this fundamental challenge for every one of us is, how do you adapt to so much change, and how do you learn to flourish in turbulence?
I know. It's a very open-ended question, but let me be a bit more specific. You mentioned that we are into wealth management. In India, as all of us know, that the awareness and knowledge on personal finance is limited, right? And if you look at what Morgan Housel has to say, he is one of this favorite, which I think in his book is the ability to do what you want to, when you want to, with whom you want to, for as long as you want, is absolutely priceless. And probably this is the highest form of dividend which one can expect. So and then somewhere in the book you also mentioned that how much is enough. And I think that's one question, whether it is to do with money or otherwise, everybody keeps struggling. So, what are your thoughts in terms of, financial independence, and, for a professional who's starting his career, or somebody who's in his mid-management executive right now, how do they get financial independence, and then, somewhere calculate or tangibilize how much is enough?
It's a great question again. You're just on a roll today with good questions. So look, this issue of money is of central importance in our life, fundamentally because we live in a capitalist society. Okay, so everything comes at a price. And so if you don't have money, life is tough. And anybody who says money can't buy happiness, etc., is talking from a nice vantage point when they have more than enough. So in my book, I talk about money is like salt. Okay, if you have too little salt, it's a problem. If there's too much salt in the food, it's a problem. So you need to find that right balance. And why this is important is, if you don't have enough money, life is tough. You have no freedom. You're just in an existential mode. If you very quickly, you can start chasing money as a goal, and you can become a slave to money. In between is some happiness. So look, what would I say about this? First of all, remember that most of us are going to live much longer than our parents and our grandparents. Okay, life expectancy in most countries, unless there's some war or some sort of thing, is generally increasing. And the 100-year life is within reach for many people. Certainly we know relatives, parents, etc., are living into their late 80s, early 90s. Now, that's not altogether good news, because if you don't have enough savings, enough investments, and these days not every organization is giving pensions, you're essentially on your own. And if you can run out of cash, particularly if inflation assumptions go crazy and so forth. So look, I think there are 4 or 5 very, very obvious things. First is live within your means. And, I always lived within my means, even when I was making a lot less. You talked about a nice middle-class start. My parents were very, very middle class. When we started out, it was actually lower middle class. And I actually decided not to be a burden on my parents. And so I went out and got a scholarship, the National Science Scholarship. And that was 200 rupees. But I managed to save within that money. Not only did I pay for my tuition and books and all that, I saved some money also. Then I got a scholarship to go to the US, but it wasn't generous. It was $500, which even in 1985, 86 was not a lot of money. But I lived on $350. Okay. Then as I earned more, I made sure my lifestyle wasn't growing faster than my income. Okay. And again, Viren, this sounds really obvious, but today people are just not so thoughtful about their cash flow and living within their means, and credit is easy, and people like you are out there constantly giving them money that they shouldn't have, lending them money they shouldn't have. Whereas when I look at the people I admire, for instance, Nandan Nilekani lives nearby. And as his wealth grew from nothing to whatever billions he has, it's the same house. His lifestyle hasn't changed. I used to meet Warren Buffett regularly. He was one of the three richest people until recently. And one day I met him and he said, "Hey, let me show you something." He pulled out his wallet and he showed a McDonald's senior citizen discount card. Okay. And he was so proud of it. Here's a man who's worth some 100 billion US dollars, but he will still go and get the senior citizen discount card so that he gets a So I think living within your means is important. Number three, investing. You cannot leave your money in fixed deposit and fixed income instruments. You have to be exposed to the equity markets. And that's how you get to some reasonable level of comfort. The final thing is, whenever I was very clever about managing my money, it ended badly. So if you try to time the market, pick one stock, all those things turned out badly. Whenever I was passive and sort of content to take a long-term view, things worked out. Okay. So when I did nothing just out of laziness, the portfolio followed the index and it did fine. Same thing, I forgot to get out of Microsoft when I left Microsoft. And I was so glad, because between 2014 and 2020, the stock has multiplied 5 times. So there's something about just picking good investments and leaving it alone for long periods of time, and it works out.
So I think, we take, a couple of hours to explain the whole financial planning module, and, why timing is not important, but time in the market is important. But I think you beautifully summarize in very few minutes, another lesson of crisp articulation as a takeaway from the quick discussion we've had.
Yeah.
But you mentioned some...
But equally important, Viren, was the other question, but I won't spend much time on that. You also have to figure out quickly how much is enough, or your insecurity or greed can cause you to go on chasing more and more. And the problem with that is you don't feel good about yourself. You always feel poor, and you're not doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. At the end of the day, this money is supposed to buy you freedom to do what you really want. And instead, it has enslaved you. So I had a real problem with this, and I had to really work out, what is my number, and then grow comfortable with that. And I think the flip side of the coin is also important, but go read the book. It costs only 200 rupees, so it's fine.
Yes. Since I've read the book, let me ask you a leading question of what you just mentioned. Today we have in the call a lot of, highly accomplished, retired professionals also. And, if you really go back and look at a decade back at least, the opportunities for retired personnel were limited. But today with, this whole vibrant, thriving startup ecosystem which exists in a country, it's a very different ball game. But, and okay, so at one end we have, your good friend, Suta, who's started Happiest Mind at the age of, 70s, maybe 73,
Yeah,
74, I
70
think.
something. Yeah.
Yeah. And, yesterday we heard, the world number one women's tennis player, Ashley Barty, announcing retirement at the age of 25 because she wants to do something else. Maybe she's, done what she had thought of. So, my question to you is, how does a accomplished retired professional now jump back on this whole bandwagon of entrepreneurship? And, the ones who are thinking of retirement, how do you define it? Because, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, the lifelines are going longer. So yeah.
Good question. First thing I would say is, if you're thinking about retirement, stop thinking. Okay, it's a bad idea. Okay, you don't want to retire. What you want to be able to do is, from time to time, pursue new interests. But the day you are stop being engaged intellectually and fully is the day your physical decline begins. And I've seen this with so many people. And so our good friend John Rockefeller, who you talked about, had one more good quote. He said two more good quotes actually. One is, he said, a man should die in the saddle. Now he was talking, this was 100 years ago, so he used man, but men or women. His point was, you should die active. Okay. And the second thing he said, you should die so that in a way that your last check bounces. Okay, that means you should give away your money while you're alive, and your last check should actually bounce. Anyway, so I'd say don't think about retirement, particularly because we are all going to hopefully live much longer than we thought and expect. So many of us will be into our 80s and 90s, and you want to be vibrant till nearly the very end. And so the question, and of course, nobody is going to give you a job after you're 50. Okay. These days, there's real bias towards younger people who bring new ideas, new energy. And so after 50, definitely you're living on borrowed time. So what we have to do, all of us, whether, somebody age 35 or age 50 or age 60, 70, is constantly find new challenges that will engage and occupy us. And you do that by following your curiosity, like I've done. But in order to do that, you need to have these assets. You need your little financial planning and your nest egg. You also need to cultivate, very important, Viren, intangible assets. And maybe this is where I'll talk about it. Intangible assets means things like your health, okay, your family and closest friends, your reputation, your professional and personal reputation, your networks, okay, your spirituality, or that which is, these are the things that will cushion the shocks in your life. Okay, during COVID, many of us had shocks. Okay, either lost a job, you lost somebody you loved, or you became really ill and whatever. So this is going to happen more and more frequently to more and more of us. So these intangible assets cushion the shocks. They're also the assets that will help you make transitions from one thing to a completely different thing. If you ask me, how did you go from diesel engines to software to banking to now energy to whatever? It's because I cultivated these assets better than anybody else in my peer group. So I would say, to generic advice, cultivate your intangible assets, reinvent yourselves by remaining curious and taking on new challenges. And it's not important to be an entrepreneur. That's one thing, right? Somebody may want to start a business, and age is no limit. The best time to start a business is today, no matter what age that is. But we're not all interested in starting a business. Somebody is interested in, teaching. Somebody else wants to go make society better. Somebody else wants to mentor younger people. Whatever that is, it's fine. Go figure out what that is. And age is just a number. It absolutely is just a number. I'd write in the book about somebody who's finished their PhD at 75. Okay, and it's a serious science PhD from a top university, not some honoris causa. So age is just a number. Long answer.
No, I think very, very, in fact, gives much more clarity in terms of how you think of, your retirement. And like you rightly said, everybody has a different yardstick to measure, and that's, I think, more important. You mentioned, met Warren and Nandan, you obviously very closely worked with, Bill Gates also. Now, obviously, you have your own way of working, and, some of these leaders have a very different way of leadership, right? And you very often talk about, various leadership themes. There's a reference of why leadership is also important in the current times. And you don't need to be a formal leader or a formal authority to be a leader, right? So what is your advice to these, some of us who are at different stages of their own careers, but, either in terms of organizational, cultural building, or, build strong institutions, let me put this way.
Look, I think leadership is the central issue of our times. It is the central issue. If you look at all the issues we face today within an organization or around the community where you live, in your own housing society, you look at the country, look at the world, everywhere there are giant problems, and these problems are generally getting worse, not better, because the people who have the position and authority to do something about it aren't. Okay. And so there's the gap between problems and the ability to solve them is only growing bigger. The leadership gap is only becoming bigger. And so this is the big issue. And the real problem we're in is our mental model of who a leader is and what leadership is completely obsolete and wrong. Okay. I bet 99% of the people on this call tend to confuse leadership with title, position, and formal authority. ये president है, वो प्रधानमंत्री जी हैं, वो ये GM है. So this must be a leader. Then no, that is a title, and it comes with a certain authority, formal authority, institutional authority. But leadership is not that. Leadership is a behavior. It's an act. Okay, you know this very well because you've worked in many large organizations. You can have somebody who's got a title of president and we call him or her leader, and they're actually risk averse. They won't take any decision because they're afraid it'll be wrong. They play politics, and that's how they retain their thing. That is not leadership. Yeah. And the same time, you'll see somebody else who has the office boy, and I'm seeing this particularly from my memory of BOB, Office of Chairman. That guy is such a go-getter. He's a leader. Okay, he has no title, no formal power. So in my book, I talk about 2 or 3 examples, one of leaders. One is a 12-year-old boy called Rehan Sheikh, who lives in a slum outside Ahmedabad. And the kind of work he's doing at age 12 is fantastic, fantastic. The municipal authorities aren't able to do what he's doing. Then I talk about my neighbor here in Bangalore, who's a housewife, and she got frustrated with the garbage on the road and decided to do something. And in just 5 or 6 years, she's become the leading waste activist in Bangalore. Okay, so what I'm saying is leadership is a behavior and act. Anybody can be a leader. We all have that capacity within us. We should lose this mindset that, oh, no, I don't have the title. Somebody will get upset. Stop asking for forgiveness, for permission, ask for forgiveness. So I think the world will be much better. Our country will be much better, and your life will be much better if you start leading. Okay, so that's kind of the long answer to another simple question.
Yeah, I wish it was also easy to implement what you're saying, but I think you made it simple for us to know what are the key elements to start.
Sorry, Viren. In my work with UNICEF, we teach young people in the poorest of schools from lower caste community backgrounds how to discover their leadership. Okay, so the way you do it is not by talking leadership in the classroom and all that. The volunteer goes and starts engaging them, and they say, "Oh, what are your problems?" And then pretty soon they open up. And a simple one will be, the toilet has been broken. Okay, it's been broken for the last 2 years. I've complained to everybody, nothing happens. And in fact, this is causing the girls to drop out, okay, because it's a bigger issue for them. So then you say, okay, why don't you go fix it? They say, no, how can I fix it? Then you say, look, go find 2 friends and come back and we'll help you. And then gradually you empower them and they fix the toilet and they're stunned. Suddenly, for the first time, they discover that they can actually do something. And when they acted on their frustration, others also joined. Suddenly, they're a leader. Now they're willing to take on a bigger problem. So it is not that complicated. Okay, this is there in every human being.
So I think I'm sure people who are listening are not only enjoying the new thought process, but I'm sure they have also many questions maybe to ask you. So I'm going to pause here to request if you have any questions, please just type it on the chat box. And I have a few questions to ask to Ravi. So, by the time I ask these questions, please use the chat bot to, please ask any questions which are going in your mind, so that, once I finish my set of questions, I'll sort of read out those questions so that, Ravi can answer it. Yeah, so till such time, Ravi, we get some questions from the audience. My favorite from the book is, about this whole, phenomena of how do you put this whole parallel between how an effective board of directors should be, right? And I mean, you've been on the board for for all your life in terms of your careers, but here I think you talk about how to have a similar support group, which we call it as mentors or friends and family, who can drive success in an individual's life. And I think this is very relevant, because this is the first time I'm hearing a personal board of directors. I think it just connects very well in terms of, you made it very you branded the concept very simplistically, let me put it this way. So how does I mean, how does one find this? uh, you have certain situations in your life where you would have gone through huge challenges, and would you like to narrate some of the situations in which your personal board of director guided you to the right path?
That's a good question. So look, I, as you said, I became CEO when I was quite young. I was about 32, and I had a board. In fact, my first chairman I reported to ever, 1996, was Mr. Ratan Tata. So, and over the years, I've served on boards, I've reported to boards, I've been the chair. And what I realize is, when there is a good board, it is absolutely invaluable to the CEO and to management. Okay, because you can go to them for advice, you can go to individuals for some help, and all these things. They're just not just asking you tough questions and giving you the evaluation. And so one day I had this light bulb go off, saying I should have a similar set of people in for my personal decisions and my personal dilemmas. And gradually I became more intentional. This is slightly different from the idea of, oh, who are my mentors and so forth. So I thought about the people who really care about me and whose advice I really respect, and that each have a different perspective. So of course my wife is one person like that. There are a few friends who are very close. Then over the years I ran into people whose views or on something I really looked up to, somebody I worked with, I respected. And gradually I assembled in my mind, this is not a real body, it's not written down on a page, a set of people, probably about 15 odd people around the world, all different ages, all different types. And I said, this is my personal board. So whenever I have a choice to make or an issue to deal with, I talk to a few of them. So for instance, as I was choosing to join Microsoft, it was a scary time. So I asked 10 people, 9 out of the 10 said, don't do it. I ignored their advice and did it anyway. Few years later, I had a different choice. I was going to be the CEO of a fairly prominent company, and they talked me out of it. That was good. Even when I was debating whether to get married to Sonali or not, I sought the opinion of a few people. When we had a big challenge some years ago on one of the boards I was the co-chair of. Again, there was a set of sounding boards. So in life, we are all going to deal with situations which are really complex. And the cost of getting that decision wrong can be very high. Okay. And so at that time, you want these people to give you advice. Sometimes you need help. You want somebody who will open a door and help make a connection somewhere. Okay. Or you want to make a change in your career and you want somebody who will give you a break. So these are the people you want to accumulate and be intentional about it. So we're getting lots and lots of questions.
Yeah. So, I think there are a couple of questions, on how to handle repetitive failures or negative issues when you're bitten higher in life. And I think this is a very important question, because obviously people only see the success,
Yeah.
And with every failure you end up learning something which propels you further towards success, right?
Yeah.
So however,
Yeah.
it's the journey of overcoming the failures which is more critical, in terms of what do you learn after every failure and how do you not repeat those mistakes. But easier said than done, and
So
I'm sure
let's talk
everybody love
about
to.
that. Just yesterday on LinkedIn, I posted a one sentence quote from Albert Einstein. Okay. He said, failure is success in progress. Okay. So the point is what? When you try to do something new, when you're trying to achieve something, you will have frequent setbacks along the way. If you call that failure, you're actually wrong. Okay. That is it is merely a setback and you have to get up and keep at it, etc. Good example is a toddler who's learning to walk. You see a child who tries to get up, falls, gets up, takes 2 steps, falls, gets. If each time the child falls, if you say, oh my God, I failed, and you give up, none of us would be walking. Okay. So setbacks are an integral and inevitable part of life and of trying to stretch and achieve new things. Okay. That's why I said when you read my resume, it looks like success after success. There were a lot of setbacks and challenges and potholes along the way, which I don't write about, but those were real. The only failure is actually giving up. Okay. That is the only failure. Everything else is just dealing with challenges and setbacks along the way. And the way you do it is develop mental toughness. Okay. The way you do it is develop those intangible assets. Okay. So that when you fall, there is a cushion, there's a safety net. So that's how you deal with it. But get this idea of failure. This word failure is a very bad word. It's a very negative word. It makes us feel bad about ourselves. Call it setback.
That's a huge one, because most of us, take it with a pinch of salt, in terms of when you just end up pausing your direction because you have one or two failures or setbacks, and then
No, look, Viren, but you talked about IIT. What no very few people know, but even though I talk about it, is I took JEE 3 times to get the department and IIT I wanted. Okay. So yeah, I think I hold the India record for the number of times I successfully did JEE. I got into Harvard Business School on the second attempt, not the first attempt. Okay. It took me 10 years to convince my wife to marry me. 10 years. That's a public, it's a story actually. So
and
that's
in spite of a good board of directors you
in
had.
spite of a good board of, no, here the issue was I was clear. It took a lot of persuasive skills. So my point is, in life, if you're going to achieve something significant, you have to be tenacious. You can't give up the first few times you try and it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think John Rockefeller also in one of his quotes says that perseverance is the only skill you need. If you could master that, then everything, all answers lies in that.
Indeed, indeed. Okay,
Okay,
what are the questions you want to take?
you have one interesting question. This is almost like a Miss World or a Miss Universe question. So I'm lucky to ask that question to you, because if you were to go back to your life, right, or if you were to have a chance to start your life again, to whatever, fulfill some desires which remain unattended, or change certain things which in your career or in life, what would they be?
I don't, when I turned 47 and I'm now 59, just turned 59, I decided that there was no certainty in life that I was going to live to 80 and all. Okay. So I said, I'm going to start doing the things that I consider important. I'm going to stop postponing doing the things I enjoy. I'm going to stop spending any time with people I don't like, who are who are negative energy. I'm going to spend time only with people with positive energy. And I've been on that trip now for 12 years. So at the end of 12 years, I would say I really don't have too many regrets about the choices I've made. And I think that is really the most important thing, to live your life in a way so that if your end comes now, you don't have too many unfulfilled things and regrets and all that. So, I wish I had started something sooner. Okay. For instance, I wish I'd started consciously being nicer to people much sooner. Okay. Now, for some years now, I tried to try and consciously say, how do I make every interaction with any person, whether it's a waiter at a restaurant or some stranger or my co-workers, how do I make every interaction leave them feeling positive? I do this consciously, Viren. I've trained myself. I wish I'd started that 20 years ago. But no, so I by and large don't have too many regrets.
Okay, I think almost ideal life, I must say. But Ravi, there are a few questions, and I just want to rephrase into something which relates back to your book. About the passion economy. There are some questions around it in terms of, you mentioned in one of your talks that you should make passion your paycheck as you age, right? Now, passion is not really static.
Yeah.
The challenge is, what you're passionate at 25
Yeah.
is very different than from what you're passionate about, let's say, at 50, because at the earlier younger ages, people are socialist, they become capitalist much later, and things keep changing. So in this, how does one identify and then follow one's passion?
Look, success will come when you operate at the intersection of three things: what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and what the world appreciates or values. If you can constantly be in that zone, which is the intersection of these three things, you're going to be fine. And obviously, this is not static. This changes. All three things change over time. Okay. I also like to say, look, this passion is an unreliable word. Okay. What is more important, a better word is follow your curiosity. Okay. And the chances are it will be something that you enjoy and you can learn to get passionate about it. So the key thing is to remain curious. So for instance, if you say, am I passionate about energy today? No, I'm not. Okay. I'm very curious about it. It's one of the most important challenges the world is facing. And I have an opportunity to do something about it. So I said, I'll take it. Okay, I'm very interested. I know nothing. I keep talking to all the new people. And I say, first thing is, I'm not an energy expert. I know nothing. I'm learning. Okay. And they're happy to teach me. So so I think the important thing is to follow your curiosity, and that's a dynamic thing. It'll evolve over the years, what you're interested in, what you're curious about, but that's how you do it.
You mentioned that you're still learning, and Charlie Munger once said that you are a student for life because you keep,
Yeah,
learning. There's also, this whole thing about climate change, which is, it's very evolving. And I think there are a few questions in your capacity as the chair of GAAPP. What are the, vision priorities for some of these, global energy alliances? What are
sure.
the new challenges, and what is it that you're trying to achieve through that?
Well, let me just focus on GAP, which is the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. So look, we have three big goals. The first is to help developing countries, including India, much of Africa, etc., make the transition from fossil fuels to renewable fuels. And in the process, over this 10 years, this decade, we want to eliminate 4 billion tons of carbon dioxide. And typically you do that by decommissioning a coal plant or pulling out diesel generator sets and replacing them with solar panels or rooftop solar or whatever. The second goal we have is energy access. So there are still 3 billion people who don't have access to reliable electricity. Okay. And near the very large number of them live in India, for instance. And so our goal is to give energy access to 1 billion people through this decade. And then in this whole process, we want to make sure that it is not just for rich people. And so we have focused on how do you make sure that transition results in large amount of job creation, 150 million new jobs. So this is our goal. So far, we have raised a significant financial commitments of about 10 and a half, $11 billion, which sounds like a lot, but it's nothing because this transition is going to cost countries about 5%, 3, 4, 5% of GDP. Okay. So you'll need trillions of dollars. So this is, but this is a good start, good enough to show the pathways to success. So right now, for instance, the whole global team is coming to India on April 11th. We're meeting everybody in Mumbai, including big actors like Reliance, Adani, Tata, but then all the financiers of different sorts. Then we go to Delhi to meet government, etc. And yeah, we're going to try and figure out where can we be a catalyst. So India is still struggling greatly with energy transition. The Prime Minister at Glasgow said, look, we'll achieve net zero by 2070. And what is that? That is basically an admission that we have very, very tough challenges. And therefore, we don't really know how to tackle them. So let's put a date that is far enough out. And hopefully we'll figure it out and bring that date in. So our attempt will be to try and see if we can work with government and private sector in India and bring that to 2050. Okay. And in South Africa, right now, we're focusing on a project to retire some coal power plants. Okay, in Indonesia, we're trying to retire a coal mine, a whole coal mine. In Congo, we are trying to put up a 5 gigawatt solar project to light up a whole township, which is dark. Okay, everybody is using kerosene and such things to light up. So this is our intention. There are mostly only questions, problems, and challenges, and we have to figure out the solutions.
So you are already part of the solution stream globally by looking at the fund, and I'm sure it is going to help many lives to stay focused on this whole energy. There's one interesting question which has just come in that what are the things you do to remain self-motivated and energetic throughout the life phase?
Yeah, look, if you are not sleepwalking through life, if you're just aware, there's just so many things that you can get excited about. Okay. So, and I actually, just as I said, over and over again, I follow whatever interests me. So for instance, I like dogs. Okay. And so I spend a lot of time with street dogs. So there are 5 in our house, and we're between all our neighbors, we look after another 20 or so dogs. Okay. Now that takes time, and it also gives me a lot of happiness. Okay. So you say, well, how do I get energetic? I do things I enjoy. This is one of them. I like intellectually challenging problems. Well, okay, there's this lovely thing called GAP, which is the mother of all problems. Okay, so that gives me energy because, I'm applying my mind to something interesting. I'm working with really interesting people on a really important problem. I read a lot. I read voraciously, and not just about one thing. If you look at my bookshelf, it is huge variety of topics. So I enjoy conversations with people. So even if it's a bus conductor, I'll strike a conversation and learn something. So the point is, for me, everything is interesting. So the issue is, how do you cultivate a mindset so that you constantly are finding everything interesting? Because life is endlessly interesting.
There are a host of questions I'm seeing on green hydrogen project and carbon free world. So I'll just give a pass to it right now. But one interesting I'm seeing is, conflicts of opinion.
Yeah.
Now, obviously all of us in every start of our life, career, personal life, husband, wife, there is always a conflict of opinion. And I think I saw that in your book also, conflict resolution is also one of the skill sets or one of the soft skill sets,
Critical.
which is trending on the top in your, top 10 or whatever, skill sets needed. So how do you handle conflicts? How do you, so, you have a courage of conviction, okay, this works pretty well. And then there is conflict with somebody. So how do you manage situations where, the idea is not to, go into an opposite direction on the other people, person's, view of, but to, capture that and then get a, right consensus decision.
Beautiful question. Look, first thing is to accept that conflict is an inevitable part of life. Okay, the only time that you're going to have no conflict is when you're dead. So, yeah, and there'll be conflicts at home, there'll be conflicts at work, there'll be conflicts in the community. And that's just the nature of human existence. So, okay. The second thing is a principle that Narayan Murthy used to emphasize at Infosys a lot, which is you have to learn to disagree without becoming disagreeable. Okay. It was a very beautiful thing. So you and I can disagree on something. We can have very different opinions. Okay. And it doesn't even matter who's right, who's wrong. But can we do this in a way without attacking each other and getting personal? Okay. And much of our problem today is we personalize this conflict and we start hating the other side. Okay. Whereas if you can just agree that we have different perspectives, things are a little bit easier. I think a third very crucial thing is to learn to listen and understand. It doesn't matter whether you agree or not, but I think it goes better if you're able to try and understand why is that person holding that view. Okay. It's not just because they're stupid. So you have to really, really make some effort to stop thinking about your position or view and try and understand why does Viren hold that view that is so opposite to what I believe. Okay. And then you may either change your opinion or you may even more feel that poor Viren, he's really on a wrong path. And the biggest issue is your own ego. In my case, that's the biggest issue. Wherever this conflict is really big, it's because my ego has become really big. And so I have to remind myself that, to try and see if I can keep that ego at some modest proportion. And then you try and find middle grounds, okay? So rarely do you have to take a stand which you have to be prepared to die for. You can usually navigate and find solutions. So I think if you don't personalize the conflict within, a lot of it becomes more bearable.
Yeah, so it is about a particular thing which you did not like in an individual, and that thing changes and you start liking the individual. So it's not about the individual, but certain actions, behavior of that individual, which
separate the person from the issue.
Okay, there is since you mentioned about voracious reading, I think another question was, what are your favorite books? Any good favorite author? I can add if you have a role model.
Yeah, no. So look, my book is filled with references to interesting reading and so forth. So rather than me say two books, like a Miss India contest, I read the Bhagavad Gita every night and the Bible in the morning. No, I don't. I'd say, since you've been generous enough to gift some books and the rest can, acquire it, that's the nicest collection of readings that I'm able to recommend.
Great. I'll just take one last question. There are many. I was trying to keep this, rather low, but I think the whole order is changing. There is so much of conflict in terms of war. There are, in Bangalore where you stay, there are issues in terms of college-going students and all that. And I think the underlying question is, there's a lot more which is changing in terms of, communal harmony, in terms of, global peace. You addressing this question of, carbon emissions and other things through the, chair of the fund. But what are the trends you see? And, in your earlier book, you also talk about the whole chaos which is there. But what are the trends which you think will evolve in the next few years so that individuals get ready for that?
So the trend is, unfortunately, I'm quite negative in my view, that we are headed for a period of worsening conflict, and the conflict will be at every level: conflict between nations and groups of nations. The conflict is going to be between communities. You will see conflict between states on issues like water. You will see, yeah, and you will see many people take advantage of this and try to amplify the differences between us, etc. So I am not generally optimistic about the macro trends. And the question is, what can we do individually in this process? And I can only say what I have chosen to do, which is to, in my interactions, in my sort of local areas of influence, around our neighborhood, in my workplace, try and be a healer. Okay, try and do your best to heal wounds and bring people together across differences. And that's all you can do. If you start thinking about all the big stuff, you can get really negative, really depressed, really angry, and all these mental health issues are because we've spent too much time thinking about these issues that we can have no influence over. What you can influence is things around you in your life, and try and be like Gandhiji said, be the change you wish to see in the world. So for instance, I think the whole Hindu-Muslim divide in our country is just becoming very, very serious, and it is not going to end well. Okay. Now, I know many people on this call will have different opinion from me, but I do think this is a big, big issue. So I said, all right, I'm going to do what I can. So we fund the education of a lot of Muslim girls. Okay. So I'll do my bit. I don't know anything else I can do to change opinions. So you figure out what matters to you and the kind of human being you wish to be, and live that way.
Okay, I think there are, questions which are popping up, but I'll ask the last question, Ravi. We're almost more than an hour, in fact. This is, what is the correlation between success and happiness? Because not every successful person is happy. And we all know that happiness definitely is nothing to do with the money or wealth you earn. So, what is happiness?
I think it's a superb question, and I'm glad we're ending on that. First of all, there is no correlation between success and happiness. And I actually talk about there are three different things: being successful, being seen as successful, and feeling successful are three very different things. And you can be successful and not feel successful, or vice versa. Okay. And there are three or four things I've learned deeply about this whole idea of happiness or satisfaction. First is, it is a state of mind. Okay, it is manufactured by the mind. It has nothing to do with your reality. So there's this famous experiment where one person gets his arm amputated because of an accident. And on the same day, another fellow ends up winning a big lottery. Okay. 6 months later, you look at who's happy. And it turns out both are back to the same level of happiness they were before. Okay. So, you would think the chap who won the lottery is way happier than he was, and the other fellow is down in some ditch. It turns out not to be the case. So the trick to, if you want to be happy, is to learn to control your mind, learn to dissociate yourself from your thoughts. And the best way to do that is different types of meditation and breath work and so forth. Okay. So that's one. The second thing I've realized is, if you're going to be truly happy, you have to lose yourself. The more the mind focuses on me, the more unhappy you are. The more the mind is distracted by other things. And you can distract yourself by your work, by doing really interesting work. You can distract yourself by completely devoting yourself to raising your child or children. You can distract yourself by doing some social service and saving the world. You can distract yourself by throwing yourself into music, which is a very important thing, or whatever. The more the mind stops focusing on itself, the more likely you are to be happy. And the third thing I would say about happiness is what I used the quote that the actor Irfan Khan, as he was dying. And somebody said, "How are you able to be so positive even as you're dying?" He says, "Life is under no obligation to give you what you expect." I wrote that down on the front page of my diary. Life is under no obligation to give you what you expect. So I think a lot of happiness comes from wanting what you have instead of insisting on having what you want. Okay. So that mental shift as we grow older is important. And the final thing is the practice of gratitude. No matter how bad your situation is, you can still count 10 things that you are grateful for. Okay. And so for 20 years now, I've been practicing this little, as I wake up in the morning, I try and count 10 things I'm grateful for. I count 10 things that could have gone wrong, which didn't go wrong. And I'm yeah, grateful. So I think these sorts of small practices within have a greater impact on happiness than a lot of achievement and all those things. I'm not saying you shouldn't strive, you shouldn't try to make the best of things. You must do that. But I think the attitude, the mindset is fundamentally the determinant of happiness rather than what you achieve. Happiness and money are not inversely related. Sorry, Venkat. There is a positive correlation up to a point, then it loses correlation. Okay. So if you ask somebody who has no money for food, they are not likely to be happy. But then after a point, having more money doesn't buy you more happiness. It loses correlation. So I'm sorry, I had to pick up on that because
I think somebody is also commenting in the last that wanting what you have rather than having what you want.
Absolutely. Yeah, Nitin, that's absolutely right. Great.
So Ravi, thank you so much. I think you've done more than justice to some of our tough questions. In fact, you've given a very practical, template, I must say, for all of us to, quickly follow in our daily life. And it's been a fantastic last an hour and 15 minutes. I think the wisdom of the last 1.5 hours or 1 hour 15 minutes is so beautifully in caps. It's a learning of all your journey, your career, your life. And all of us, if we could learn a bit of it, I'm sure it'll make us more happy for sure. So thank you so much for taking time. I would also recommend everybody to read your book. I've read it and I'm extremely happy that I got it early. For those of you who would love to have, please write to us. We would be most happy to also send a complimentary copy of the book to you all.
So, Biren, I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's when you write a book, writing it is just about 20% of the job. After that, it's through these conversations that we spread the ideas. So thank you for giving the opportunity. And I want to tell everybody who's there, look, there's lots of videos and resources on YouTube. Just help yourself to it. Come to LinkedIn. And so if I put out all this material, podcasts, videos. So you may find that is more interesting than reading. So take care and good luck to everyone.
Ravi, this was our first attempt, by the way, to move out of market leading webinars and getting experts from stock market and the debt market. And I'm glad to see the feedback coming from everybody that we should do more of that. You will continue to be the first of that experiment, and it has worked extremely well. So thank you so much once again.
Beautiful. To be continued. Bye-bye.
Look forward to seeing you in person.
Yep.
Thank you everyone for attending it. we can end the webinar now. Thank you.
It was a good session, and I find that a lot of people were engaged till the end. It's quite remarkable, actually.
Yeah, are we still there, Ravi? I think, yeah. So,
Neha, can you probably take us to another room?
Yeah, I'm doing that, Siddharth.